Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating source text that explores how a 2,600-year-old ancient document provides, well, a profound psychological blueprint for overcoming absolute human despair. It's essentially a deep dive into the architecture of hopelessness, and we're going to look at the exact mechanisms required to rebuild a life when, literally, absolutely everything has burned to the ground.
Before we really get into it, I want you to consider a question. What do you think is the single most stressful human experience? Seriously, think about the absolute deepest level of trauma a person can possibly endure. I mean, we all face hurdles, right? Job loss, financial ruin, severe illness. But what is the absolute ceiling of human emotional pain?
Well, looking at the stress index data, it brilliantly illustrates that losing a loved one, specifically a child or a spouse, ranks at the very top. It is the ultimate human stressor. It's a kind of pain that just defies time and adaptation. No matter how much time passes, the human mind genuinely struggles to adapt to the sheer finality of death. It creates this psychological wasteland that feels utterly impossible to navigate.
And that brings us to the ancient prophet Ezekiel. Now, he wasn't just some historical figure completely detached from reality. He intimately understood this exact level of catastrophic, life-altering loss. The source material uses his story not just as a religious narrative, but honestly as a masterclass in confronting total devastation.
Let's take a look at the Babylonian exile. Initially, these early Jewish captives held on to this tiny shred of hope that they might actually get to return home. But then, the absolute worst happened. The sacred temple in Jerusalem was burned to ash, and their nation was completely destroyed. Every single ounce of hope was violently extinguished.
Ezekiel's descent into despair was just unrelenting. First, he was exiled to Babylon. Then, he suffered the sudden tragic death of his beloved wife, and, to make it unimaginably worse, he was strictly forbidden by God to publicly mourn her. He had to serve as this bleak prophetic sign to his people. So he was forced to bear his shattered heart in total silence, eventually witnessing a terrifying vision, his slaughtered compatriots scattered across the valley as literally nothing but dry bones.
So the absolutely crucial point comes when God places Ezekiel right in the middle of this desolate valley of skeletal remains, which, symbolize his dead nation, his dead wife, his dead hopes, and asks him an impossible, mind-bending question. Can these bones live? It's a question that completely bypasses human logic, because from a rational standpoint, the answer is an obvious, resounding no way.
Now, what's really interesting about this is Ezekiel's incredible response to that impossible question. He simply says, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know." Talk about a profound pivot. He refuses to give a falsely optimistic yes because, let's face it, the reality is way too grim. But he also refuses to give a despairing no. Instead, he completely surrenders his logic to faith, basically relinquishing control right at the bottom of the abyss.
And here is the real secret hidden within the text. God didn't just magically fix the situation while Ezekiel stood by and watched. Instead, he issued an invitation to participate. He commanded Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones. He actually asked a broken, grieving, completely powerless human being to use his own voice to speak life into the deadness. The source highlights this as a massive paradigm shift. Basically, God is inviting a human to actively partner in the miracle of restoration.
To see how this builds, the source draws a brilliant, direct line right across millennia. On one side, we have Ezekiel's ancient emotional paralysis, the total loss of his nation and wife. And on the other, we see the tragic physical paralysis of a modern 17-year-old girl named Joni Eareckson Tada back in 1967.
After a devastating diving accident in the Chesapeake Bay snapped her cervical spine and left her a quadriplegic, Joni experienced her own literal valley of dry bones. Trapped in a hospital bed, completely unable to move her arms or legs, she fell into deep suicidal despair. She couldn't even physically act on her desire to end her life. Her agonizing question, much like the despair of those exiled captives we talked about, was simply, why should I live?
Okay, let's dive into this incredible turnaround. While lying in that hospital bed, Joni meditated deeply on Ezekiel's story. Just like the ancient prophet, she surrendered her own logic and despair, echoing that exact same sentiment. You alone know. I can't see the hope, but you do. And in that surrender, she discovered something profound. While her limbs were completely lifeless, she realized she still had agency. Her lips could still move.
And this is the breathtaking visual proof of her partnership with restoration. Joni learned to hold a paintbrush between her teeth. She began to paint beautiful canvases, write books, and share her story. She took the absolute deadness of her physical situation and breathed life into it with literally the only tools she had left, her lips and her voice, just as Ezekiel used his voice in that desolate valley.
And the scale of this restoration? It is staggering. Hundreds of thousands. That's the impact. Her profound despair was transformed into a massive channel of grace. She launched a global ministry, providing wheelchairs, Bibles, and hope to hundreds of thousands of people with disabilities worldwide. From a paralyzed teenager wanting to die to a beacon of life for the entire globe. Just incredible.
So why does this matter for us today? Well, it's because we all have our own modern dry bones. Maybe for you, it's broken, unhealable relationships that seem totally beyond repair. Or perhaps it's overwhelming, stubborn life struggles that just won't budge. Or maybe a deep spiritual apathy where you just feel entirely exhausted and depleted. These are your personal valleys.
The ultimate takeaway from this explainer is that you are being invited, right now, to partner in restoring the desolate valleys of your own life. It's not about passively waiting around. It's about actively participating with whatever small movement or voice you have left. Which leaves us with one lingering, provocative question to ponder as we wrap up. When you look at the dry bones in your own life, will you join in making these bones live?